Hello, one and all. Welcome to another episode of MMA Vision Analysis. This one, I'm here to talk about Khamzat Chimaev's recent comments in regards to his possible return. UFC Abu Dhabi, I believe that's UFC 308, and he does want a title shot in his return. But before getting started, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that notification to get all of this that is new from this channel, your channel, the one and only MMA Vision Analysis. I've said time and time again, Khamzat Chimaev, if he does not capture a title sometime soon, then it would just simply mean that this guy is a wasted talent. Very high potential. We all remember when Khamzat Chimaev first burst onto the scene. That was the beginning of this new decade. And he was taking back-to-back fights at a time where we really did not have many fights nor crowds present in those arenas. So he was somebody that put a smile on a lot of people's faces, somebody that gave hope at a time where humanity desperately needed hope, signs of life. This guy was inside of the octagon giving us top performances. I believe during those times he won like 4 fights in a row. He was taking fights on weeks' notice, and he was taking back-to-back fights. He was fighting like within a couple, like some of his fights were like 2-3 weeks apart. So all respect goes to Khamzat Chimaev. Obviously the time suited him well to take all of those fights, first of all, just because it was hectic putting fights together during those times, and all of the stuff that came along with travel and whatnot. Khamzat Chimaev was able to capitalize on the time, had as many fights as he possibly can in the shortest amount of time, which ultimately propelled his name to the top of the division, whether it be the welterweight or the middleweight division. And he quickly became fan favorite. Personally, Khamzat Chimaev has to be one of my favorite fighters. He has to be one of top 3 favorite fighters, current active fighters on that UFC roster. If you mention entertainment, you have to mention Khamzat Chimaev. The guy is a top name draw. He's a captivating figure. He is someone that people tune in to watch. Really, despite the lack of titles, at least in the UFC, I'm not aware if Khamzat won anything anywhere else. I wouldn't put it past him if he has. But in the UFC, he has not won any titles still, despite him not being a champion of any particular division. The amount of respect and anticipation for his return is just out of this world. Me personally, I'm more looking forward to Khamzat Chimaev's return than Conor McGregor's return. Just because this guy actually has potential to capture titles and be top of divisions. But unfortunately for Khamzat Chimaev, he has been dealing with some health issues, and there are visa issues, if I'm not mistaken, which prevents him from entering the States. If I'm not mistaken, that's most definitely the case. He's not the only guy from Chechnya that has visa issues. Just that part of the world, generally speaking. Some of those guys do have visa issues. That's why they can perhaps only fight currently somewhere in the Middle East, like whether it be Abu Dhabi, Dubai. I'm not even sure if they hosted any UFC events in Dubai. Not that I'm aware of. I know Abu Dhabi's happened before. Obviously, the last Saudi Arabia fight card that was supposed to host Chimaev versus Whitaker. Unfortunately for Chimaev, is not able to participate in that fight. Now he's talking about his potential UFC return. UFC 308, Abu Dhabi, that is, Middle East. And he claims that he wants a direct title shot once he gets back in the mix. Personally, I would not be opposed to giving Khamzat Chimaev a title shot. Some people may raise some eyebrows, scratch some chins. It's Khamzat Chimaev. I do understand that sometimes matchups don't seem to make sense for... So there's 2 different ways of looking at matchups. You can look at it by ranking, oh, this guy deserves it, so therefore he should be next. Or you look at the reality of things, and the reality of things says that despite the rankings, there are circumstances that hold people back from participating in fights. So what do you do when a Conor McGregor has an injury? I know this has nothing to do with ranking. You have to replace him with a fighter. What I'm trying to say is that things don't go quite as planned sometimes, and this is definitely the case for Khamzat Chimaev. I do understand that it may rub some people off the wrong way, the fact that Khamzat Chimaev can come back and just get a title shot. Personally, I would not be opposed to it. What people have to realize is that this is a business, okay? It's the fighting business. And there's one other thing that has to be added to the statement. It's entertainment business, okay? So what I'm trying to say here is that sometimes you have to make the most entertaining fights happen. That's actually precisely why people love the UFC, and that's why people kind of despise boxing. Because boxing, you get to sit around for years without the two fighters that are supposed to face each other fight each other. Despite the rankings, despite the champion status, boxing gets really, really annoying with that kind of thing. Obviously, we don't want that to be the case with the UFC. That's why people, some people are opposed to Chandler facing Makhachev. I'm not necessarily opposed to that. Why? I do understand if you were to look at the rankings and the past results of the few fights, but even though if you were looking at the past results of a few fights, you have to understand that Chandler is not losing like clear-cut fight. They're all competitive fights, and he's losing to the best of the best. So personally, I look at the entertainment factor that Chandler brings to the table, and you have to come up with the conclusion that it's just out of this world. The guy promises entertainment. You know what I mean? Despite the rankings. Sometimes you get a guy that's very highly ranked, but the style of fighting is quote-unquote boring. So I'm not opposed to seeing the most entertaining fights happen. And going back to my subject, I do digress a bit. I really do believe that Khamzat Chimaev can come back UFC 308 and get a title shot and just kind of let everything in that middleweight division play out. I know that's a bit unfortunate for Strickland in this case. Some may say, what does this have to do with Strickland? Well, you would think that Robert Whittaker has to face one more person before he gets a title shot. That one more person has to be someone, whether it be Chimaev again, or reschedule that match, or obviously Strickland. Strickland expressed his frustration, and he just blatantly said that he's just not interested in fighting Whittaker. I don't blame Strickland. That Whittaker fight is a very close fight. People thought that somehow Strickland was just going to overpower Paulo Costa. That was not the case. All of these fights are extremely close. So I really do believe that out of this whole situation, Strickland is definitely getting the short end of the stick, so to say. And Khamzat Chimaev is a win-win situation. I just hope the guy recovers and gets back in there ASAP. I would not be opposed to seeing Khamzat Chimaev fight the champion of that division come that time. I really hope that that person that Khamzat Chimaev fights is Adesanya. With all respect to Drika as current middleweight champion here, but I'm looking for super fights. Fights that inspire new upcoming generations. Fights that are going to add crowds to this new thriving sport. It is the golden age of mixed martial arts, specifically the UFC. And matchups like Chimaev Adesanya only adds to the aura, the mystique, and really the overall anticipation and stock, raises the stock of the company, UFC specifically. So we need super fights to happen. I'm not opposed to seeing Chandler, Islam. I'm not opposed to seeing McGregor, Max Holloway for BMF. I'm not opposed to seeing Chimaev versus the champion of the division, hopefully Israel Adesanya, come UFC 308. I'm all for super fights. fights that are going to bring major eyes to the table. And we have to kind of put the rankings aside at times because that could be misleading. Not misleading in terms of the actual ranking. Obviously, those guys are ranked the way they are for a reason. But you have to understand that you can bring a number 13 guy, and that number 13 guy can beat the champion of the division without a problem. So you have to forget about the ranking, because once that bell rings, it's all even. If you made it this far, I appreciate you for sticking around. Please let me know what you think in the comments and like, subscribe for more.